Years for Howard Jarvis Taxpayers as a legislative director, and he's out there battling idiots, for lack of a kinder word. And so I'd like you all to give him a good hand and welcome him. And
Thanks, Bill. Bill, thank you. Rousing, wonderful introduction as always. When they're tagged as idiots and I'm tagged as the good guy, that's a good thing. It's good to be back before you. Thank you. Pens are always helpful. I recognize many familiar faces here. It's good to be back among you guys again. Do apologize for the time thing. I had 7 o'clock in my phone for some reason, so I got here and thought I was on time, and I was not on time. So my apologies for that. Bill, how much time do I have? Good. Okay. Well, if you guys get sick and tired and you want to hook me, just go ahead. And I'll try and keep this short because I do want to leave a bunch of time for questions. Dennis, thanks for keeping everyone alive and engaged until I got here. Appreciate that. So, Sacramento. Oy. What a mess. Where to start? Well, let's start with what's the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. A lot of you guys know who we are. Some of you, though, may not. We were founded in 1978 following the passage of Prop 13, which was a statewide ballot initiative. Some of you may ask, what is Prop 13? It does 2 things. It caps your property taxes at 1% of the price at which you own your home or business, and also sets a 2/3 vote for any special taxes approved either by the state legislature or by localities, local governments. So things like a transportation special tax, for instance, requires a 2/3 vote because of the provisions of Prop 13. So 40-year anniversary this year, this coming June. Hard to believe it's been that long, but it has. So what was it like before Prop 13? And I think it's important to just sort of establish and lay out that historical context. Prop 13 passed at a very challenging time for homeowners up and down the state, not unlike the situation that a lot of homeowners were in 10 years ago during the Great Recession. There were individuals on fixed incomes in 1978 who had paid off their mortgages, who were yet getting foreclosed on their properties because they could not pay the property taxes. And that was due in large part to the fact that, you know, sometimes the assessor didn't get around every year to reassess your home and your property. So it was not uncommon over a period of 2, 3, 4 years for property taxes to double, you know, in any given set of years. And if you were on a fixed income, you're not paying that off. And you had no way to budget for it. You had no way to control what it was. And Howard Jarvis saw that, recognized it, and said, hey, there needs to be stability in this system. And that was when Prop 13's 1% cap came into being. Misconceptions that need to be addressed. Prop 13 does more than just help homeowners. It also helps renters, because apartment owners and apartment tenants, thus, are taxed at the same 1% rate as residential homeowners. Apartment complexes tend to be assessed as commercial property, and both commercial property, residential property has a uniform 1% rate under Proposition 13, which again has been in place for 40 years. There have been efforts afoot, and you guys might have heard of some of these things, called split roll. Anyone heard of split roll? Okay, so split roll is, in essence, a breaking up of that 1% uniform property tax cap to something different. There's a lot of ways you can do a split roll. You can reassess property, commercial property, industrial property, more frequently than you assess residential property, thus creating higher property tax revenues. That could be a form of a split roll. You could increase Prop 13's 1% cap for commercial and industrial property to something higher. That could be another form of a split roll. This is an ongoing problem within the state of California, and it's something that could be on the ballot. It doesn't look like it'll be on the ballot this year, but it could be on the ballot in 2020. You know, you've got a lot of really fervent left-of-center liberals running around out there saying, oh, there's greedy corporations benefiting from Prop 13, the wealthy 1%, blah, blah, blah. You know, if we can increase property taxes up to market value for these corporations, they'll finally be paying their quote-unquote fair share, and we'll get $8, $9, $10 billion of additional revenue a year. Homeowners are going to be protected. It's all going to be great, right? Except I see shaking of heads. That's good. Shake, shake. That's great. It's not going to be good, right? It's going to be bad. For one thing, you're not going to get $8, $9, $10 billion from those quote-unquote greedy corporations and the wealthy 1%. You're not going to get that amount of money. The only way you can get $8, $9, $10 billion is if you go after small businesses, which make up, of course, 99% of the state economy and is the driving force of what's left of the state's economic engine. So we continue to partner with groups like the National Federation of Independent Business and others to continue to watch out against this threat of a split roll. But a split roll would not help renters. It would not help property owners. It would be devastating for that community. Prop 13 is also the savior of local government. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Prop 13 provides a cushion for local governments, because just as you as a homeowner know how much in property taxes you're going to pay not only when you buy the home, but also 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line, local governments also know roughly how much revenue they're going to bring in off of property taxes. And that's incredibly important because property and sales taxes make up about 80% of the revenue that a local municipality brings in any given year. We know sales taxes are obviously incredibly volatile because they fluctuate with a strong or a weak economy. So property tax revenue becomes very, very important for a local government. And Prop 13 does provide, with its 1% cap, that stable source of revenue. That's going to be incredibly important for local governments in the years to come, because especially with these unfunded pension liabilities, you know, what's been the common theme with Mammoth Lakes and San Bernardino and Stockton and Vallejo? They've all gone bankrupt. They've all gone bankrupt. Prop 13 is the best friend of a local municipality. Very few city council members or county supervisors, even here, are ever going to tell you that, but it remains true. It's important to note also Howard Jarvis is a nonpartisan association. We have 200,000 members up and down the state of California. About a quarter of those are in the 9-county Bay Area region, which is certainly not a conservative hotbed of activity. Of those 200,000 members up and down the state, they're all mostly grassroots taxpayers, much like yourselves, you know, fighting to make a living just like all of us. We are truly a grassroots organization. 1/3 of our members are registered Democrats. Another 20% are declined to state. You know, I was speaking to a group of, you know, left of center millennial post-college students today that I speak to every year, and, you know, I sort of rebut their liberal garbage and throw it back at them for an hour. It's kind of fun. But they're like, oh, Howard Jarvis, you know, rabid conservative Tea Party movement group. And I said, no, not really. You know, because like I said, 1/3 of us are registered Democrats and 20% are declined to state. We're truly nonpartisan, and I bring that up for a reason. And that reason is simply there is nothing partisan about Prop 13, and there's nothing partisan about taxes. Keeping people in their homes should not be a partisan thing. Helping people to protect their small business should not be a partisan thing. So there's two major objections to Prop 13 that we hear all the time. And we get phone calls into our office at least once a week with either of these objections. The first one is, it's not fair. Prop 13 is not fair. I own a house for 3 years, Someone next to me who owns roughly the same type and style of house, who's owned their home for 15 or 20 years, pays substantially less in property taxes. Why is this? We own the same type of tract home. What's going on? It's not fair. Of course Prop 13 is fair. Prop 13 is absolutely fair. The United States Supreme Court, in a case in the 1980s called Nordlinger versus Hahn, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Prop 13 was entirely fair, and its acquisition value-based system was entirely fair for this simple reason. When you buy your home, you know it's going to be 1% of the price at which you paid plus 2% a year. So you know when you buy your home what your property taxes are going to be, and you know 30 years down the line what your property taxes are going to be. If it's too much, don't buy the house. Really straightforward. What's unfair about that? That's objection number one. Objection number two is, what's the other? Why am I blanking on this? I mean, the fact that that's not fair is really and truly the big objection and the hue and cry that we get every year when it comes to Prop 13. If I can remember the other one, I will come back to it. There's major things afoot over here in the California legislature. Last year was not a good year for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association or for taxpayers writ large. There were 3 major tax increases that were approved, and the first thing I want to hit on is the gas tax increase that was approved last April by a 2/3 vote of the legislature. Gas tax, devastating, obviously, for average California families and low-income individuals up and down the state of California. It took what was then the second highest gas tax in the nation and increased it by what will be in 2019 a 19-cent per gallon gas tax increase. It increased diesel costs by 20 cents a gallon, and it increased, on average, your car taxes per vehicle by $50 a year, to the tune of an average family of 4 of about $400 to $500 a year, assuming you're an average family of 4 and you own 2 cars. That's about what it's going to be this year. Gas tax took effect in November, does all that. The issue that we have, and I'm sure you guys know that we have brought forward an initiative to repeal this gas and car tax increase, which we do fervently hope will be on the ballot in November. If you would like petitions for that, by the way, and you haven't signed them yet, we actually ran out in our office, but go ahead and call our office because we'll be getting more in this week and we would be happy to mail them out to you. Our phone number, if you do have pens handy, is 916-444-9950. We have short forms with 3 signature blanks on there, long forms with 10 signature blanks, and also instructions about how to fill them out. We'd be happy to mail you any number of forms as long as you promise to get the signatures and send them back by April. We are well on our way to qualifying a gas and car tax repeal for the November ballot. Signatures are coming in really, really great, including from the grassroots. I mean, hundreds of thousands of signatures just from average Californians like yourselves. This is a paid signature effort, but a lot of the signatures have come in from average Californians, and it is going to be on the November ballot. The argument that we're making on this is really straightforward. We're not making the argument that taxes suck and our roads don't need to be fixed. Taxes are bad, obviously, but our roads do need to be fixed. We have a $54 billion unfunded road maintenance backlog over the next 10 years that needs to be addressed. If you've been on Highway 80 and Highway 99, we all see how bad our roads are, and especially in comparison to Nevada, how much they desperately need to be fixed. So that's not the issue, obviously, that we're running with here. What we're saying is this gas and car tax needs to be repealed because the California legislature has not been fiscally responsible and prudent with taxpayer dollars. I bring up numerous points in which to make this case. Over the last 6 years, general fund spending has increased well over $36 billion to a record budget just introduced by Governor Brown in January of $132 billion. Over, like I said, $36 billion general fund spending increase over the last 6 years of entirely new money. And yet not one dime has been spent on transportation funding of any kind. Not one dime. It's worth noting that the gas and car tax increase that was passed, all that money goes to, and it won't necessarily go to repair your roads, and I'll get back to that in a second, but what it won't go for at all is to construct new roads and new capacity. All that money goes to the extent it goes to repairing our roads, is just that. It will not build any new capacity whatsoever. There was no vote of the people, obviously, when the gas and car tax was approved back in April. No vote of the people, which runs completely contrary to a promise that Governor Brown made in 2010 when he ran against Meg Whitman, and he said any tax increase that's approved by the legislature will receive a vote of the people. This did not, and with fundamental and absolutely good reason, right? Governor Brown and the legislature decided not to put it on the ballot because he knew darn well that it was not going to get a majority vote approval of statewide voters if it was on the ballot. The Public Policy Institute of California, certainly not a conservative polling organization, noted in its most recent poll that upwards of 60% of the population opposes this gas and car tax increase and would like to see it repealed. So no wonder it didn't make it on the ballot. And that's something that this measure would do. Not only would it repeal the gas and car tax, but it would say any future gas and car taxes placed on the ballot by the legislature would require voter approval. So, we'd like to see a bipartisan solution come out of the legislature to repair our roads. We do believe our roads need to be fixed, but don't sit there when there's $36 billion of new revenue and none of it's gone to transportation. Don't sit there when we've diverted $15 billion of truck weight fees, over the last 10 years and kept that money from repairing and maintaining our roads. Don't sit there and do that and then come crying to taxpayers for more regressive gas and car taxes. It's just not going to happen, and it doesn't make any sense. Further, and this is interesting, you probably read in the run-up to the gas and car taxes that there was going to be a lockbox put in place, and all the gas and car tax money was going to go to repairing and maintaining our roads. Newsflash, that's not the case. That should come as no big surprise to many of you. There is a constitutional amendment being put on the ballot that will ensure that the gas tax money goes to repair and maintain our roads, but not the car tax money. Not the car tax money. And it says the car tax money needs to go to transportation infrastructure, but transportation infrastructure has a pretty wide definition. Transportation infrastructure includes high-speed rail. Transportation infrastructure includes any future general obligation bonds that are put on the ballot by the legislature or voters to pay for transportation. Now everyone's going to run around and say, transportation infrastructure bonds. It goes to pay for transportation. That works, right? Sure, I guess, but what it doesn't go to fix is repairing and maintaining our roads. It goes to paying off bond debt. Again, that's a violation of what voters intended when they passed 3 separate constitutional amendments 3 years ago to say unequivocally that gas and car tax money should go to maintaining and repairing our roads. Once again, they violated that promise. And finally, in 1979, you guys are probably remember the GAN spending limit was passed. The GAN spending limit capped government spending at a rate of population and inflation growth, roughly 4% a year. Over the years, the legislature has eviscerated the GAN spending limit by exempting taxes out of it. This rainy day fund is no exception because the car taxes are now exempt from applying against the GAN spending limit. So general fund revenue can just continue to go up and up and up. Taxpayers will not get a reimbursement of those funds. In the event general fund revenue comes in at a drastically higher amount because those car taxes now won't apply against the GAN spending limit. So just another way for the legislature to continue to get more money and not be able to use it effectively and responsibly. I do want to leave time for questions, and I don't know when you guys roughly end your meeting here. So let me go ahead and do that. I mean, I can talk about affordable housing. I can talk about transportation. I can talk about anything you guys want to talk about. So let me go ahead and open it up for questions, and thank you very much.
It's about a different county. My daughter just bought a house 6 months ago in Woodland. And they sent out the property tax bills, all of which were paid by the end of the year, as they should be. Sure. And in January, they suddenly decided that because the area had improved, they were due and payable an extra $2,200 due immediately, without notice and without anybody even knowing it was going to happen. They did that to that whole community. That does not seem copacetic, and I didn't know if Howard Jarvis knew that that had gone on.
There's a number of different reasons where this could happen, and that may not violate the law. I mean, unless you guys want me to run through a battery of questions to help determine what the answer could be, I can do that. But
it was just a point of information for
sure.
the office to consider, because if counties are doing this and people are planning on budgeting and then suddenly get hit with a $2,200 bill due immediately after you've already paid your taxes, there's something wrong.
Yeah, there's 5 or 6 questions I want to ask you. I'm 90% sure that's probably not illegal.
Oh, okay.
There could be things like Mello-Roos increases in play potentially. I mean, there's all sorts of different questions, things your daughter could have done to the house.
No, it's simply, they said, because the area was built up. She was on the edge of town. They built up past it, so that raised her value. But that shouldn't have gone into effect until the following year.
It probably shouldn't. Again, that is a question where I'd like to get more information. Pin me down before I leave. And we can absolutely talk about that more, because we do get these questions all the time into our office. Other questions? Otherwise, I can just keep on going too. So.
Well, it's interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine in the San Fernando Valley, and he's been on the proposition for 40 years. And we just got to talking, and I says, well, you know, if they pull this Jarvis thing off, what are you going to do? He says, sell the house and get the hell out of the state.
Sure.
Now, I have one other thing. My son bought, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, he bought a house in Roseville. It was on virgin land. And all of a sudden, he got a tax bill for $6,000. And the way I see it, I think it's probably like a cap and trade type thing. So I don't know. Are you familiar with anything like that?
Yeah. So you're saying he bought the house
Then they taxed us $6,000 on
in Roosevelt. Now, was it a new house?
It was brand new, and they said because there was never a house built there before, you're going to pay an extra $6,000.
Okay. Well, again, there could be a lot of reasons for that also, because it was an improvement to the land. You know, that could certainly account for that level of increase. If it was in a subdivision where there was a Mello-Roos tax put into play, that's a tax separate from Prop 13's 1% cap. That could certainly account for a large part of that increase, if not the whole thing, quite frankly. So again, I mean, I would have to,
Yeah.
drill down and get more information.
But I just felt it was kind of like maybe a cap and trade type situation before we got really into it in the state. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I mean, cap and trade has very little to do, with that situation. For those that don't know, cap and trade was approved in July by a 2/3 vote of the legislature, including 7 Republicans, unfortunately. And cap and trade, in essence, is what I like to call a pay-to-pollute scheme. In that these companies, and there's about 300 industries across the state that are impacted by cap and trade, they essentially pay to pollute. They buy credits and trade them with other impacted industries in order for the privilege of being able to continue to run their business. That includes things like oil refineries and cement making companies. I mean, all sorts of other businesses that are impacted by cap and trade. And unfortunately, it impacts motorists because since you drive cars, you obviously emit carbon as well, and you have your own carbon footprint, and you unfortunately have to pay into this, to the tune of about 72 cents a gallon of gas, in addition to the SB1 gas tax increase over the next 10 years. Devastating, obviously, for motorists. And, as time goes on, that is going to make things like power generation more expensive as, SMUD and PG&E has to continue to push towards renewable energy sources to be able to hit a 50%, or, soon an 80%, renewable energy threshold by the year 2040. That is going to make power more expensive. That is going to make home ownership more expensive. So yeah, I mean, indirectly, cap and trade does absolutely have something to do with that. But in the short term, it's going to dramatically hurt, again, motorists by and large. Yeah, sir.
I have a question regarding the raise on the gas tax.
Okay.
Okay, my research on it, I found out that they've got this program called the MAP 21 program in San Francisco. In the last 2 years, they took $108 million out of the gas fund and used it to put high-density housing in San Francisco. And they're also got another $50 million to put up a transit station there because it's high-density housing. None of these people buy cars. They don't buy batteries, tires, gas, anything else. Sure. I just don't understand how they can take so much money out of the gas tax fund and use it to build high-density housing in cities where they don't have cars. It's called the MAP 21 program. I couldn't believe I fell far off. $216 million. Oakland's climbed onto it. Alameda's climbed onto it. And we're talking another $100 million taken out of the gas tax fund.
Sure. MAP 21, or Agenda 21, as it's commonly known to, continues to pervade the state, especially in more liberal counties. And unfortunately, this is social engineering at its best. And they can use transportation funds because they've managed to combine, cap and trade and affordable housing and transportation, into one sort of lump sum thing. And they argue that, if you can keep cars off the road and keep people, living in sustainable communities a mile from their job, that's an appropriate use of gas tax revenue. And with some exceptions, that is where some of your gas and car tax revenue is going and will go.
Do you have any kind of a listing of how much money has been diverted from the gas fund for projects such as this? Because they don't highlight this when they talk about where all the gas tax money is going. It's like you find it by the way.
Yeah. Specifically for those purposes, no. But, I mean, I can unequivocally tell you that over the last 10 years, just through the diversion of the truck weight fees and some of the other sleight of hand that's going on, you're looking at $20 billion of money that should go to repair and maintain our roads that's been diverted into the general fund for purposes including those programs.
For what?
For purposes including the programs that you mentioned, among other things. I mean, that's $20 billion. Everyone's carping and crying about a $54 billion road maintenance backlog. If we had just gone ahead and spent the money that was supposed to go to repair our roads to actually repairing our roads, it would still be a shortfall, but not something that you would need $5.4 billion a year of gas and car taxes in order to fix.
Yeah, but we're gonna have a train.
You will have a train,
To
yes.
Bakersfield. From Bakersfield, you take a bus over the Grapevine to get to LA.
You will have a train from Chowchilla to Dinuba. A train, by the way, that is $300 million over budget
Well, naturally.
on the flat section of the rail. We're not talking about the Pacheco Pass in the Bay Area. We're not talking about the Tehachapi Mountain Range bordering Los Angeles. We're talking about
Over Tehachapi?
what?
Are they gonna be going over the Tehachapi Loop?
Well, I mean, that was the theory originally, and they just decided that was so incredibly, because the goal was always to build from Fresno down to LA first. That was always the goal, and once they found out they couldn't get over the Tehachapis, they decided to start building in the other direction instead. You know, and that was about 8 months ago. So, and they still haven't figured out how they're going to get the train into LA, because if they don't go over the Tehachapis, they got to go through Bakersfield and cut it all the way around, which brings its own hurdles and difficulties.
Yeah, you have to take a bus down from Bakersfield to get, take rail down there and then take
Yeah.
the bus over.
Right. No, it's a mess, and then you have eminent domain issues with that also, you know, because you'd have to condemn more property in order to do that too. So yeah, the whole thing is a gigantic mess that's incredibly over budget. And, you know, you want to talk about money going to transportation, that's a $10 billion general obligation bond that's, you know, going to building pillars, Stonehenge, as Victor David Hansen called it, you know, to build pillars in the Central Valley, you know, that we're spending $600 million a year on just to pay off the interest for. You know, could that money be better suited building new road capacity? You bet. But are they doing that? No. So maybe Gavin or John Cox or Travis Allen or whoever is our next governor can at least get some common sense when it comes to that and, you know, repeal high-speed rail. One can only hope.
One can only hope Gavin Newsom has any common sense. You mentioned that 80% renewables by 2040. Seems to me I just read, and it may have been on Steve Frank's, one of Steve Frank's things, or Stephen Greenhunt, I'm not sure, that one of the legislators is looking at trying to do 100% by 2040.
Yeah, there's so many mandates out there right now that it's hard to keep track of which one's which. You know, so the most recent one, I believe, is, I want to say it's 100% by 2050, actually, or it could be 2040, or it's getting all gas cars off our roads by 2050. That's another bill that was just introduced by the legislature. And good luck with that, because we're so far behind our alternative energy vehicle thresholds right now that it's not even funny. They're just not cost effective and affordable. If it was cost effective and affordable for everyone to buy a Volt without a state subsidy, they would have done it already. You know, we all believe in protecting the environment. We all believe in lowering greenhouse gas emissions to the extent practical, but owning a Chevy Volt or a Nissan Leaf is not practical. I'm sorry. So yeah, so those are the mandates that are in play. And unfortunately, that is just going to lead to more expensive automobile ownership and more expensive power generation for everyone here in California. And if they get rid of Prop 13, listen, I'm 35. I bought my house at 30 solely because of Prop 13. Everybody running around, and this was I remembered the other Prop 13 misconception. So let me just spit that out right now, because this is important. Everyone's running around saying, oh, Prop 13 doesn't apply to me because I haven't owned my home since 1978. Okay, we get this one all the time too. Listen, you benefit from Prop 13 regardless of the length of time that you've owned your home. Now, if you have owned your home since 1978, you've saved roughly $170,000 on your property taxes as a direct result of the proposition. If you've owned your home over 5 years, like I have, you know, you've saved less, obviously, but it's still roughly $15,000. Not an insignificant chunk of change. They get rid of Prop 13. What's left keeping anybody in this state with the highest income tax, the highest sales tax, the highest car tax, the highest gas tax, the highest corporate tax in the Western United States, and even with Prop 13, the 13th highest per capita state and local property tax rate in the nation. 13th, even with Prop 13. I will move to Nevada. I will move to Texas. Listen, I got married last month. Thank you. Thank you. My wife is from Florida. She's new to California. We sit and talk all the time. She used to work in the Florida legislature and was involved in politics and now owns her own marketing company. And, we sit and talk and, just for fun, I like, throwing out all the crazy stuff that happens here in California just to get a reaction because it's priceless. No smog checks out there. I don't have to pay for my plastic or my paper bags. There's no state income tax. And you should have seen the look on her face when I told her about the banning of the plastic straws. Have you guys heard about this? A bill to ban plastic straws, and at least for now, with fines and jail time if you are given a plastic straw in a restaurant against your will. Now, the author claims that he will get rid of the fines and jail time, which is good, but we're still talking about banning plastic straws in a state legislature. Are you kidding? You're not. No, we're not kidding, unfortunately. We have serious problems, guys, in the state of California. And sir, I know you had a question. I'll come back to you, but I'm getting on a roll now. We have serious problems in the state of California that need to be addressed. 1/3 of renters in the state of California spend at least half of their take-home pay on rent. Over 40% of California residents cannot afford a median-priced home, which is now about $475,000, a median-priced home in the state of California. 20% of the state is at or below the poverty line. California has 12% of the nation's population, but 34% of the nation's welfare caseload. 1/3 of the state is on Medi-Cal. How many what? That's a good question. At least a handful. And there's another bill in the legislature to broaden that out completely to illegal immigrants. Right now, it's just children of illegal immigrants, and they want to broaden it out to everybody. That is a bill in the legislature this year. Medi-Cal is the fastest growing cost driver right now in the state of California, adding billions of dollars a year to general fund costs. It's growing faster than prisons. It's growing faster than education. They do. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Let's talk about that too. The progressive income tax structure in the state of California, where the top 1% of income earners in the state, roughly 144,000 people, pay over 60% of all of the income tax that the state receives. 144,000 people. Stunning and scary. Stunning and yeah. And that is why people are moving out, because it is your wealthy who are your upwardly mobile who are leaving. It is entirely possible over the course of the next census in 2020, for the first time in this state's history, we could lose a congressional seat, because we will have lost so much population that we will have lost the seat for the first time in our history. The 2010 census was the first time in our history where we didn't pick up a seat. We were flat. We netted out. That's a serious problem too. Now, you're not going to hear that from many people, but that's indicative of what is going on here in the state of California. We're just not competitive. Affordable housing is a huge issue. You know, it's driving people into poverty. It's why 20% of the state is in poverty. We need to build, according to the Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office, what? Yes. Yes, but we need to build roughly 250,000 units of housing a year, every year, for the next decade, just to keep pace with ongoing growth in the state of California. You know how many units of housing we're building now? About 90,000. About 90,000 a year. Some years not even that. That's not enough. That's barely enough to replace the homes that we're losing because of wear and tear, or because of fires, or because of natural disasters. You know, and we're sitting there passing $5 billion bonds to build affordable housing, which we opposed. And we're passing SB2 recording taxes where it's going to cost, and get this, okay, this was the third tax, not just gas tax, not just cap and trade, but a recording tax that's going to impact homeowners up and down the state of California. All three of those taxes received at least one Republican vote this year. Let's talk about the recording tax. $225 tax, $75 tax per recording instrument, up to a max of $225. It doesn't impact owner-occupied homes, right? But it does impact you if you refinance your home. That's another $225. If you modify your mortgage to avoid foreclosure, it's another $225. If you foreclose on your property, it's $225. If you record the death of a spouse in the midst of your grief, it's another $225. A construction loan is $225. A mechanic's lien is $225. If you take out those loans and then remove them when you're done, it's another $225 to repeal the loan, or the lien against your property. And on and on and on and on, death by 1,000 cuts. That measure is going to generate between $250 and $300 million a year in new revenue. And that supposedly is going to go to affordable housing. But here's the rub, guys. It costs about $250,000 to build a unit of affordable housing. Actually, it's more than that. On the coast, it's about $330,000 to build a unit of affordable housing in California. You do the math. $300 million, $330,000 to build a unit of affordable housing. Are we fixing this affordable housing problem with bonds and taxes? We're not. So what are we doing instead? We're bringing forward rent control by repealing Costa-Hawkins. What that allows for is for single-family units being rented out to be subject to rent control. Not just apartments, but condos and single-family homes. Thankfully, that bill was knocked out in the legislature, but it's going to be on the ballot in November, more than likely, for y'all to consider. You want to talk about Prop 13 forcing you to leave. What about rent control? Is that going to aid our affordable housing crisis? It will not, because it will not encourage landowners and apartment managers to refurbish their units. And it's not going to allow the younger generation to be able to take advantage of the rent control units, because they're all going to be dominated by older individuals. And when those individuals move out and you can't increase the rates, what's the incentive? What's the incentive to do anything? So, but there's not only that, there's prevailing wage on some new home developments. That's going to do a lot to further new home growth and development. And thankfully this bill didn't pass last year, but there's the mandated solar panels on new home development. That's going to do a lot to encourage new home growth. So it's not even just we're not building enough. It's the fact that we're getting in the way of what we are trying to build. That's why we have an affordable housing crisis in the state of California. And don't even get me started about permit costs. Even in Riverside County, one of the few places where it's still affordable to live in this state, there's $100,000 of permit development costs and impact fees before you even turn a shovel of dirt into the ground. $100,000 of costs. This is why we're in the problem that we're in, guys, because we can't get out of our own way. That's the biggest issue here. And that's why we have an affordable housing issue. So, sorry to get off on that, but it does impact Prop 13. It does impact property rights. It does impact the things that we care the most about. So, sir, I know you had a question, and I'm happy to take it.
When I had my business, our CPA had Flying J truck stops. And they built one in Bakersfield that took 2 years, and I forget what ungodly amount on permits and everything. And he says the one they built in Phoenix was done in 6 months, and only like $25,000 permits. But when we were talking about the train and everything, the floating bridge across Lake Washington in Seattle, just the boondoggle these idiots come up with.
Yeah.
It's a 4-lane bridge.
Sure.
And they're going to take out, I don't know if it's gone through yet or not, if they finished it, but they're going to take out 2 lanes and put a train in 2 lanes, in 2 of the lanes, which gives you 2 going across the lake, and it's ungodly travel, just jammed with traffic.
Sure. No, silly. But that's just it, guys. I mean, everyone, and I got this today from my group of college, young, cute, liberal millennials. They're like, well, you get rid of the gas tax. What are you going to do to fix our roads? And I'm like, okay, spend money better, right? Spend money better. But let's think outside the box, right? What about public-private partnerships? What about toll roads in some limited capacity? You want to be careful with toll roads. It's not the best solution for all situations. But why aren't we even talking about this stuff? Why, anytime there's ever a problem in this state, it's a recording tax, it's a gas tax, it's a car tax, And sugar and snacks are bad, so why don't we bring back the snack tax? That's another one that's actually out there right now. $1 billion tax increase that voters put a prohibition on taxing snacks 25 years ago by a 2-to-1 margin. And the legislature thought in their infinite wisdom it would be good to amend the Constitution to try and bring it back. Thankfully, this one failed, largely because the definitions were so bad. Okay, get this. Granola bars are taxed as a snack, but granola is not. What sense does that make, right? Granola bar is taxed, granola not. Bottled water qualifies as a snack food to be taxed. So yeah, thankfully that one failed, but this is what we're up against in California. Yes, we beat back a snack tax last month. We beat back rent control. We are getting victories here, guys, but every month, every day, it's a challenge. And that's why your activism really is so important. And your ongoing activism and support is so important because we are able to beat back some of this stuff. And if we're able to get it to the ballot, there is still common sense out there where voters are responding really positively. But they need the opportunity to vote on it. And that's why we're so excited about the repeal of the gas and car tax. And so, again, I would just encourage you guys, sign the petition. Please, if you haven't already, call our office. We'd be happy to send that stuff up to you. And also become a member of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. You know, it's just $15 a year. 90% of the money we bring in every year comes from those annual $15 membership dues. We don't get money from think tanks and other groups and stuff like that. It all comes from average Californians just like you guys. So again, I apologize for the weird spot on the time. I'm happy to take more questions. I'm happy to go. I'll sit, you know what? You know, because I, misread the time, I'm happy to sit here all night if you guys want to be here and you're alert and alive and awake and all that stuff. Happy to, we'll just keep going. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for coming out and speaking to us and keeping us informed.
Yeah.
My name's Ernie Thompson. I've been an appraiser for 3 different assessor's office over the last 20 years.
Okay.
And I'm currently running for assessor in Yuba County.
Okay.
I am opposed to the split roll.
Okay.
I have a couple of concerns that I wanted to kind of bring up with you tonight. One of them involves the Williamson Act. Years ago, the state decided to take away the subvention payments.
Right.
And it basically gutted that program. Is there any talk about bringing the subvention payments back?
Talking about bringing these subvention payments to the Williamson Act, which was, incredibly crucial for farm owners and rural property owners, allowed them to get a tax break, if I'm not mistaken, in exchange for, converting part of their property to open space.
Correct. Keeping it from
Right.
being developed.
Correct. And is there any talk to bringing that back? No. No, there's not. And unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with once you take away a tax break, it's really, really hard to get it back. And, I love the fact that James Gallagher, Jim Nielsen, Brian Dolly, a lot of the rural legislators out here continue to fight for that. And it's incredibly important and crucial, and they continue to do that to their great credit. But unfortunately, they're just being drowned out. There hasn't been, I can't think of a concerted push that there's been over the last number of years to take care of that. And, also, sir, I do want to thank you for your service with the assessor's office. Assessors get a bad rap from a lot of people. And by and large, either John Krupal, my boss, or myself, we're invited to speak at the assessors conferences, maybe not every year, but pretty much every other year, okay? And we're welcomed with open arms and support because assessors, by and large, do the right thing on behalf of taxpayers. It may not seem fair, it may not seem right, but they are following the law. And thank God for Prop 13 and the fact that, individuals like yourself do work really hard to defend that day in and day out.
One thing that I've noticed that affects the people that bought during the peak of the market back, 04, 05, 06.
Right.
Their base values are so high under Prop 13, they're factoring up, continuing to factor up, that at this point right now, the Prop 8 load that we have
Right.
in the assessor's office, it's pretty much them.
Sure.
Is there any talk about doing something to, I like to call it the Euro Jubilee, is kind of how I came up with it, but
Yeah.
I know the coastal counties have recovered enough to where basically those people are back on their factoring, but us in the inland areas,
Sure.
there's people going to be on Prop 8 for the next decade, and their taxes could be affected drastically each year.
Right.
Is there any talk about doing something for those people who have, bought during the peak and they have the high ceiling is there for them?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a really good answer for that, to what kind of solution there is for that, but in my view, it would be, whatever your assessed value was, whatever your market value as of January 1st of 18, that sets your new base, kind of like a Prop 13.2.0.
Right.
That way it would really, for us in the smaller counties, our workload would really be drastically reduced, which would help. And then also those people would at least have some kind of a sense that now I do have a ceiling Because right now, the ceiling just continues to go up and up and up.
Right, right. Okay, for the sake of everybody else in the room, let me backtrack because I might have been the only person in the room that understood that conversation. So let me backtrack for a second. So, 2001, 2002, right? Housing market's going crazy, right? Shooting up like mad. Okay, so I'm going to use my hands. Okay, you got market value here. You've got your Prop 13 assessed valuation at 2% a year right here. 2002, market value shoots up. Okay, you're going up 10% a year in the middle of a huge boom housing market. Your assessed valuation plodding along at 2% a year, 2% a year, 2% a year. 2008 rolls around, right? And the bottom falls out of the barrel. And the market valuation shoots down, but maybe it doesn't shoot all the way down to your assessed valuation. So your assessed valuation continues to go up 2% a year. This, as a brief aside, is one of the major benefits of Proposition 13. It is why, despite the worst housing market since the Great Depression in the 1930s, the only year the statewide property tax assessment roll actually declined was in 2008. Every other year, the statewide property tax roll increased. In the middle of some of the worst housing market years in history, 9, 10, 11, 12, assessed valuation across the state went up. Now, as was mentioned, it took some counties longer to recover. Some counties and parts of counties in particular are still recovering, but that is one of the benefits and the strengths of Proposition 13, is that it provides protection for local government in the middle of a housing downturn. Can you imagine if we went away from Proposition 13's acquisition value-based system to a market value-based system? Now, local governments would get a slew of money in the boom times because property taxes are going up 10% a year, right? But what goes up must come down. And if you're not a smart local government and you haven't budgeted for that, or if you have unfunded pension liabilities out the yin-yang, you're not going to have a rainy day fund to cover for that, and you're not going to be able to absorb the 10% decline in property tax revenue that occurs in a market value-based system without Prop 13. So again, I come back to the point, Prop 13 is one of the only things that has kept municipalities all across the state from going bankrupt. But even that might not be enough. In the next recession, I can guarantee you it will continue to happen. And mainly that's because we have $500 billion of unfunded pension liabilities, not counting the unfunded healthcare liabilities, I might add, up and down the state that need to be dealt with over the next 40 years. It's an ongoing problem that hasn't been addressed. So, let's come back to my hands here. The bottom falls out of the housing market, right? Now, in some instances, especially if you bought your home in 2007, 2008, the market value is going to fall below your assessed valuation. Now, when the gentleman spoke about Prop 8, this is what he was referring to. If your market value falls below your assessed valuation, you are entitled to a temporary tax reduction under the provisions of Proposition 8. That reduction lasts only as long as the market valuation remains below your assessed valuation. Now, let's say you bought your house in 2008, you get that temporary tax reduction. In 2013, the market value starts to come back up. Now, it can come back up more than 2% a year. It could come back up potentially 10 or 15 or 20% a year, but only until it hits your Prop 13 assessed valuation. Once it hits that figure, it can only go back up 2% a year. Does that make sense? Okay, we all tracking? It's not the easiest thing in the whole world to explain. So, what the gentleman was talking about was, it's hard every year, if you're an assessor, to go back in and recalculate that appeal and how much money the individual taxpayers are supposed to get back each and every year. So what about rebenching that figure at a certain amount, just so we don't have to do that in perpetuity? And while I would argue that would make it easier for the local government and the assessor's office, it wouldn't necessarily make it easier for taxpayers because they might not be getting that temporary reduction anymore. I would argue that might not help the average taxpayer in a situation where their market value has fallen below their assessed valuation. So I don't think that's something we would necessarily be in favor of if I understand where you're coming from.
Reestablish, instead of the base being 2006 up here, it would be 2018, which is a little bit low. We haven't recovered to 2006 levels yet, so
Okay.
it would basically give them a base now, and then they would start indexing at 2%. So instead of, because their 2006 base value has factored up so high at this point,
Yeah.
that even though we're recovering, we're still not there.
Right.
And so
But if you bought in 2006, you're still getting a property tax break.
Yeah, you are. You are.
So if we were to rebench it,
You would be a new base lower than what you had before.
right, and,
So-
and individuals could potentially lose some, if not all, of that property tax break.
No, that would be your new Prop 13 value. Base
Oh,
year
I
value.
get what you're saying. Okay. I get what you're saying. That would be beneficial, but the legislature would never go for
I
that.
know.
Sorry, I misunderstood totally where you were coming from. Yeah, a rebenching in that way would be dramatically helpful, not just for individuals who got hurt in the recession, but probably a lot of individuals. You're talking billions and billions of dollars of additional property tax savings. Which, by the way, there is going to be an initiative on the ballot in November that we can talk about regarding property tax portability. And this is a measure brought forward by the California Association of Realtors that Howard Jarvis also supports as an extension of Prop 13. This is a measure that will absolutely make the ballot in November, and it's something you're going to want to vote for. So right now, you can transfer the base value of your property if you are over the age of 55 and you're married one time. One time. You can do it one time. And you can transfer your base to a home of equal or lesser value. Transfer your Prop 13 base. It allows you to carry your Prop 13 base to a home of equal or lesser value if you're over the age of 55. What this portability measure would do is allow for an unlimited amount of transfers if you're over the age of 55 to a home of equal or lesser value. So instead of only being able to do it once, you could do it an unlimited amount of times. I think this is incredibly valuable, especially with individuals living longer. You can't be expected to live in the same home for 20, 25 years and, still desire to carry forward your Prop 13 value. What the portability measure also allows is for a limited and partial tax deduction if you're over 55 and you transfer to a home of greater or equal value. So you can carry part of your Prop 13 base forward if you're over the age of 55 to a home of greater value. What the measure also allows for is for you to carry your property tax base to different counties. Right now, you can carry your property tax base to a home of equal or lesser value if you if you stay in the same county that you currently reside in, or you can transfer your base to 10 different counties, and I don't have that list off the top of my head, but Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Alameda, I got half, that's not bad. You can transfer your base to those counties. So you can do it in the same county or to 10 other counties. What this measure would allow you to do is transfer your base anywhere. Absolute, wonderful, perfect portability if you're over the age of 55. Going to dramatically help seniors and property owners, not necessarily going to help local governments. There is going to be a revenue hit for that, and cities and counties are probably not going to be in favor of this measure. Your average assessor's office might not even necessarily be in favor of this measure either. But suffice to say, this is going to help seniors, and it is going to be an extension of Proposition 13 that I think is going to be very valuable for a number of homeowners. So that should be on the ballot in November. I interrupted a potential question.
One of the very few things that aren't taxed yet is services, but there is talk in the Capitol about implementing some type of a tax on services. Do you know the status of that?
Sure. There have been ongoing bills the last 2 years to put a sales tax on services, not just on goods, but on services in the state of California. Listen, we are open to tax reform in the state of California. You know, right now the sales tax only applies to goods, which makes up only about a third, you know, of the entire taxable sources of revenue in the state of California, and that number continues to go down. Purchases of goods are going down, services are going up. Okay, there's definitely an inequity with the sales tax that didn't exist 30 to 40 years ago. You know, tax reform in some way may be necessary, but not the tax reform that's being introduced in the legislature, where it results in a $10 billion tax increase in exchange for a sales tax on services. You know, if you want to smooth out that revenue source, if you want to provide a more stable source of revenue, yeah, maybe we should think about broadening out the sales tax to some services. But what we should also do is lower the overall sales tax rate so individuals are not paying more. You know, if you want a fair, equitable economy to adapt to the 21st century, that's the way to do it. But is this legislature that thoughtful in doing that? No, they want more money. That's all they want. And that's been the bill that's been introduced in the legislature, and that's an absolute non-starter for us. Any other questions? Thank you guys for continuing to stay here longer than you otherwise might. I appreciate it.